So, it's been a while since I did another episode. Welcome to Julian Lytle. This is Ignorant Bliss. This episode is from November, where I moderated a Q&A with my friend Tom King, writer of Mr. Miracle, Batman, Sheriff of Babylon, The Vision, and other fine comics at Fantom Comics in DC. Here is the panel in its entirety. Hope you enjoy. Also, I just started a Patreon at patreon.com/Julian Lytle. Check out the tiers. One of the tiers is that you'll get episodes early than what's on the feed, and also reviews and things that won't be on the feed until way later. It's mostly for the Patreon. So check that out and enjoy the episode, and I'll holler at you folks later.
Number 4 was any indication.
All right.
Phoned everybody out.
Can I ask the people in the back in here?
Can everyone in the back hear me?
I hope they can hear me. You hear how loud that is?
Huh?
You hear how loud that is? They should be able to hear me fine. Look at that.
Our acoustics here are pretty bad.
But you got a microphone and a speaker, no?
Thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't believe you showed up. Thank you. What's up, buddy?
So, what we're going to do for the structure of this is that we took a couple of questions ahead of time online, and Jake spread some out. Our friend Julian is going to be moderating this really quickly. After the Q&A portion, then we're going to move everybody around so that we can get the signing started. As you saw up front and online, it's limited to 2 things per person to start. If the line moves fairly quickly, we may let people get back in line for subsequent stuff. It's mostly just to let everybody get a shot, and also to not overwhelm our lovely friend Tom. So
I can be overwhelmed. I'm okay.
but you do this all the time.
It's so hard to sign. I have a short name, so I'm okay. It's like me and Jim Lee. We can go forever.
You gotta draw those Batman faces on all the album photo books.
Cool. But let's begin. Yay!
Hello, everybody in Fantom Comics. My name is Julian Lytle. I'm a podcaster and a web cartoonist. This here is Tom King.
And you're my plant because you're an actual friend of mine.
Yes.
That was great.
Fantom does research. So this is Tom King, famous comic book writer.
No.
Excellent comic book writer.
No.
Yeah, you're famous now, bro.
That can't be true.
You was on.
There's no such thing as a famous comic book writer. There's Stan Lee, and then there's no one else.
Nah, bro, you was on Slate. You was on Slate. You had a whole hour talking about Batman.
Right, because I'm the only DC-based person, so I was the only one who could drive there.
So, I don't know how many people in this audience know your entire story, but I would like to start with like a quick overview of your origin.
Sure. My parents were killed when I was young. And I did a war on good taste. Comic book writer. What's my origin story? I grew up a super nerd. I grew up in Los Angeles. Single mother who worked for the movie studios. And I was bad at every thing you're supposed to be good at, so I couldn't run or put balls in hoops. And but one thing I could do was sit by myself and read, so I did that a lot. And so I was a super nerd, a big Marvel zombie. Avengers were my people because I thought X-Men was like too cool. So I had to be like nerd among the nerds. And I did. I loved that. I always wanted to do it for a living, but found it was impossible. And then I went to college in New York, interned at Marvel in DC, and sold my first work when I was 20 to Marvel, which was Black Knight. And I thought I was like the next Jim Shooter. I was like, yeah, I'm 20. And Jim Shooter was 13, but I was still exaggerating. But then Marvel declared bankruptcy and fired everyone. So I did what most people in this town did when they came out of college and they didn't know what to do. Like, I want to save the world, so I'll move to DC. I think I was watching too much West Wing at the time. And I joined the Justice Department. I moved, 10 blocks north of here, up in Adams Morgan, up on 16th and U. and then 9/11 happened, and I joined the CIA. I moved to Arlington. That was a mistake. I went overseas a few times. I came back. I had a kid. Didn't want to be a kid and a CIA officer at the same time. There's only time where you know that if you know CIA officers, they're working 24/7. I just didn't want to be that kind of dad. So I quit, became a house dad. I'm on Capitol Hill now. Went to I was going to write a memoir called Me and the Nannies, because it was just me and the nannies for 2 years, taking care of my kid. And then I sold a book to Simon & Schuster, and DC saw that, and I got hired, and that's it. That's the quick version.
So that book was called Once Crowded Sky, right?
Yes.
That's when I met you. That was some years ago now, right?
That was some years ago. That was 10 years ago. When is it? No. 2012. That's not 10 years ago. It's 5 years ago. Whew. It's early for a Sunday, guys. I have 3 kids.
So you went from the book, and then you were able to write at DC, thanks to some smart editors.
Thanks to Cliff Chang, who helped me out. Yeah, I did. Cliff Chang. Cliff was supposed to be the cover for Crowded Sky. Cliff Chang is an artist, you guys don't know, and he got a gig at Wonder Woman, and he called me, and it was like the last thing. He's like, "Dude, I got to totally abandon you and do Wonder Woman." I was like, "Well, that makes sense." And then like a year later, I came to him. The book failed. It was a complete failure. Like nobody bought it, so I was hand selling it, going from con to con. If you guys are local cons, I was doing that Dunloring con at a fire station. I was doing the little Maryland con where you worked. It was half of the con was just a bunch of dudes at a table, and half of it was dudes playing basketball in the gym. And so you just squeaking squeakers. So I did that for 2 years, just hand selling my book. And then I met Cliff at a con. I was like, "Hey, Cliff, my book got this great," and I just lied. It's a big success. And he gave me a bunch of emails of DC editors. I emailed 30 editors, and one responded. It was Karen Berger, who's the head of Vertigo at the time, and she got me my first gig. I think out of pity, but I'll take pity.
So, what was the first story you did at DC that led to you teaming up with Tim Seeley on Grayson?
So Karen Berger. If you people don't know, Karen Berger is she's probably the one. I think if you made a list of greatest editors in history of comics, Karen probably number one. She brought Neil Gaiman, she brought Alan Moore, she brought Jason Aaron, she brought Grant Morrison, and so
she low key the GOAT.
Yeah, she's the best, and then they fired her. But anyways, so she I think she probably just saw the CIA thing. She just ignored the book thing. She's like, "Oh, maybe I can do something like that." So she arranged New York Comic Con 4 years ago or so. She's like, "Hey, well, let's get together and have some coffee." And I just thought it was like to check if I was a crazy person, because when you say the CIA thing, like most people assume you're a crazy person, which is not so untrue. So I didn't prepare anything, and then so she came and she's like, "Instead of coffee, let's go sit at your crappy table, and then you pitch me a series for Vertigo." And I had nothing, so like walking back to my table, and I had to think in my head and create a whole series. And I created this terrible series, and I pitched it to her at the table, and it's one of those things where you can see the pitch coming out of your mouth, and you can see how much they don't like it. And she's just like, her face is collapsing and she's dying on the table. And I think honestly, because she's like, "Oh, I made him go through all this stuff," she handed me off to another editor and said, "Well, you can have an 8-pager." So I had an 8-pager in a small annual called Time Warp, which was about Hitler dying, and it was called what the heck was it called? Excuse me, I swear too much. Sorry about that, buddy. This is DC, you can handle it. Anyways, it was that old trope of what if you went back in time and killed Hitler, but it was all told from the sister's perspective, so she had no idea what was going on. So she's just walking one day, and some time traveler comes back and shoots her brother, and the world goes on, and her life gets terrible, and the world gets better. It was a very typical me story. Sad, and a child died. It's like, yeah, it's a Tom King censure.
So depressing.
It was so depressing. She hung herself in the last panel.
So much depression, people.
So much depression.
That's par for the course.
So you got the 8-pager. What happened next? Without any of the politics. What was Grayson next or?
Yeah, Grayson's next. Yeah, I got right. Sheriff was next. First, I pitched a series that went all the way up, and Dan DiDio said, "Who the fuck is this guy?" And he rejected me. And I pitched another series, which was Sheriff. I really didn't want to write about the war, but I was like so desperate just to like not be a failed writer. So I was like, fine, I'll write about the war. So I wrote Sheriff, and that got accepted, and they were going to publish it in the last second. They decided not to. And then I got Grayson, which was co-writing with Tim Seeley.
So how many people in the room read Grayson? Oh, yeah, that's a nice little number. So was that your first time entering the Batman universe? Like working in it.
Yeah, that was my first time working in the Batman universe.
Did you enjoy writing Grayson?
Yeah, dude, Dick Grayson was my favorite character. And it wasn't so sad. It was funny. It was such a revelation because I wrote these, I write very sad, depressing comics, and I wrote one for Dick Grayson. And Tim Seeley calls me. He's like, "Man, this is great. This is wonderful. This is good. But this is not what we're doing for a living." He's like, "Dick Grayson is a character who embraces the joy," and I was like, "Oh, I get it. Okay." So, yeah, I mean, I love that series, and we got to do super experimental things. And it was Mikel Yanini, who I still work with today. Was like the first genius artist that I got to work with, besides Tom Fowler. And I wrote my first issue. I wrote backwards. If anyone's read that issue, it's this number 3. It was like a crossover issue, and they're like, "Tom, we're gonna do a crossover issue." And I'm like, "Great, I'm gonna write it backwards." And they're like, "This guy thinks he's Alan Moore," and I'm like, "Yes." I'm like, I have my "What would Alan Moore" tattoo. I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." And so and Grayson went really well. We did a lot of cool stuff with Grayson. It was a fun series.
So at this time you were also working on Sheriff of Babylon?
No, what happened was Sheriff got totally sidetracked and no one would publish it. And after Grayson, Omega Men came next. See, Grayson was me getting half a gig because I was co-writing it, so it still wasn't full time. If you're a comic writer, ideally you want to write 4 books a month, so you're writing basically a book a week. And so with Grayson, I was writing 1 book every other month, so I had like an eighth of a job. And I didn't realize I was a full-time writer until I got Omega Men, which came. That was like Grayson, like 3 months into Grayson, I got offered Omega Men. Offered to pitch Omega Man. And
so Omega Man was a pretty different book for you because it deals with aliens in space. It's like full
it's
Babylon
space opera.
5
yeah,
and just there's a lot of that book is low-key depressing too, but
no, there's some fun stuff.
There is some fun stuff. The Tiger dude is pretty fun.
Tiger's cool.
So
Callista with her sword.
That book, it was critically acclaimed, but then it got canceled.
Yeah, nobody likes that. Nobody read that book.
Yeah, it didn't sell well, but everybody was jocking it heavy. So how did that feel to have a comic that like a really passionate small group of people really championed it to the point where it's like DC was like, "Yo, I guess we can't cancel this though."
It was horribly depressing because I knew it was good, but I knew so when I got the Batman gig, which came like a year after that, we did this whole announcement thing where you sit on the stage and like Dan DiDio like takes everyone and is like, "Tom, what are you working on tonight?" And it's on live on YouTube. And we did a practice for it, and we're all just kind of joking around, like kind of making fun of each other as we did it. And I make fun of Dan for his comics that he writes because they're not the best comics.
Them joints is terrible. All of them joints is terrible. He's being nice because Dan DiDio is like that dude, but
because he's very nice.
All them joints is whack.
Puts food in my kid's mouth.
Them joints is whack. That being said, he might be the nicest dude ever. He should never write superhero comics again.
So that's exactly what I said, right? And so he teases me back, and he's like, "Tom, you do that again, I'm gonna make you write our lowest selling book." And I paused and I was like, "Dan, I write your lowest selling book." And there was this look on his face like, I just gave this guy Batman. has to move 100,000 copies. He can't move 5 of Omega Men. And I could tell. I was like, thank God we're on camera. Like, he can't fire me at this moment. Yeah, Omega Men. Literally at the time, the Omega Men's last issue, we have the editor told me was the worst selling book in Marvel and DC for that month, which meant it was probably because that was like a low selling time for the industry. So it's probably the lowest selling mainstream book of the last 10 years.
So it was an Image comic.
Yeah, so it was an Image comic.
All right, that ain't too bad.
But that gives you the freedom, you know. When the best thing they can do is you're like, we don't care about this book. I mean, I talked to Frank Miller about this, and he'll tell you like the best thing that happened in his career is someone gave him Daredevil and said this book is canceled and it's crap and you'll never do anything with it. And he's like, boom, I can do whatever I want with it. And that's what Omega Man was. Like nobody cared. And once it had been sort of renewed, that's what saved that book. Was the fans saved the book, and then people saw that it had been canceled, and so they kind of got interested in it. And so the best thing that ever happened in that book was that it got canceled. And so then you have freedom, and you can do all sorts of weird. I mean, we did crazy stuff with that book, which I can't believe they let us do.
So before we start getting to like the real burn up the chart stuff, I think Omega Man was the first time I really noticed you use the 9-panel grid that Alan Moore and his homeboy in Watchmen.
I told you I had a tattoo.
Yeah. That was the first time I think people really saw you use that and use it so effectively where it didn't seem like you was straight biting and copying. Just how much more than the usual, like what went to your mind to say like, yo, I want to use the 9-panel grid with this space opera?
Well, we couldn't find an artist for Omega Men, and I had through a buddy of mine, Juan Castro, point out a guy that we like called Barney Bagenda, but he had never done anything. He was an Indonesian artist, and we asked him for samples and all, and he had never done a panel page before. So when you're dealing with an artist where you don't know if he can tell a story or not, the easiest way to sort of deal with that is to put him on a grid. So that's where I did that, where I started with, and then I could for Omega Man I did my own layouts where I say okay, there's 9 panels on a page, I'd label each panel, if this is what you do on one page and one panel too. And then it didn't work, but it almost worked, where I was trying to do this structural thing with Omega Man, because if you look at an Omega Man, it's a reflective figure. The left side reflects the right side, so every issue of Omega Man, the layouts in the first 10 pages reflect the layouts in the second 10 pages, and then the first 10 issue layouts reflect, the first 6 issue layouts reflect the second 6 issue layouts. If you look at the actual book, I didn't pull it off. There's 2 or 3 panels, but that's out of 9 times 20 times 12. So that's pretty good. But yeah, so I was trying to do sort of a formal thing. Again, I was copying Alan Moore and what he did. I ran into Dave Gibbons at the Eisners this year, and I said, "Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I stole everything from you." And he's a fan of Sheriff, and he's like, dude, I stole everything from Steve Ditko, so we're good. And then so if I ever run into Steve Ditko, I'll be like, oh, I'm sorry I stole everything from you, and then he'll hit me in the face. Like, you did steal everything from me.
Yo, if you find Steve Ditko, man, you deserve an award. So
everybody knows where he is. He's in that apartment.
He lives like what, in 40th Street? Yeah, like you just go find him and knock on his door. But so at this point, I think you ventured across the street and you did some work at Marvel.
Yeah, then I did Vision.
Yeah. And everyone loves Vision. And I recently just finished Vision because I'm late.
Because you don't like me? You wouldn't read?
What? I have beef with with Marvel Comics, so I didn't want to read it.
Oh, you have beef with Marvel Comics?
Yeah, we're not going to get into that. Leading question from my guest. But yeah, I read it. That was a pretty interesting take on the character. That was a take that I don't think I've read in all my years of reading Vision. That was the first one where it felt like a cyberpunk story, like Philip K. Dick or anything I read in a lot of Japanese manga, things like Pluto and the like. So, what inspired you to have Vision move to Nova and start a family and cause all that?
It's in Cherrydale. It's very specific.
Yo, to the street, the school, like
the major battle takes place at Courthouse movie theaters.
was it
Arlington Police.
Yeah, Arlington Police.
I was like, okay. But yeah, what brought you to want to put robotic Avenger Vision in this type of situation versus his usual, like, I'm a robot and I'm in love with Scarlet Witch and then I get destroyed and then someone puts me back together again?
So when an editor gives you a pitch or a story like early in your career and they're like, we have this character we want you to work with, and then they're just going to say some character to you, the next sentence is, oh, that's my favorite character, I've always wanted to work with him, whatever character they say. So they're like, we have this perfect character for you, Tom, it's Vision. I'm like, Vision, yeah, he's my favorite character, I've always wanted to work with him. Like, who cares about Vision? Like, he had like one good storyline in West Coast Avengers in 1989 or something. And he'd been dead for 10 years. But I said that, so I lied, and that's always good to do in publishing. And then I was like, but then you want to pitch to the editor, and you want to sort of guess what's in their head without asking them, because you want to seem smart, but you kind of hint at it. You're like, what? Because they're like, pitch us something for Vision. And you're like, what genre? And he's like, sci-fi. And so I'm thinking in my head, oh great, I'm going to do this thing where he travels around, he meets all those like Starlin characters, like the In-Betweener and all those stuff. And then like the next email was sci-fi but no space. So I was like, what? Isn't that what sci-fi is? So then I'm like, I don't know what sci-fi and not space is. So then I thought, like, Frankenstein. I was like, what do I do with him? Like Frankenstein? That's kind of, so it's like Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein is a movie I like. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, he creates his own wife. That's kind of cool, but that's his Bride of Frankenstein. That's already done. And I was like, oh, he creates a wife and kids for himself to love. I was like, oh, that's kind of fucked up. And when you get to that point where you're like kind of effed up, you're like, oh, okay, then you're on to something. And so then I pitched it to our buddy Daryl Taylor, who's also another podcaster, and I was like, it's Vision, but he has a family and he creates them, and they all and I was like, and then they live in the suburbs. Because I'm a city boy, so I obviously think the suburbs are messed up. And so, and Daryl's like, that sounds really boring. It's like, it sounds like an 80s sitcom. And I was like, oh, it does. And then I just automatically flew back just to not be boring. I was like, oh, but it makes him evil and he goes crazy and kills everybody. He's like, okay, that could be good. So then the pitch became Breaking Bad Vision. And and that was the simplest pitch to make. That was so easy. Once you say that, they're like, okay, I get it. So yeah, so that's how it's. And then that happened. Vision 1 came out in that time that Omega Man we were talking about was canceled. So after Omega Man 4 or 5, and I was just convinced that I couldn't write comics. I didn't know how to do it, and so like once I was convinced of that, I just threw out all the rules. I was like, let's forget it. I might as well just write something I like because I know it's going to be canceled in 3 issues anyways, and I was convinced that the reason Omega Man failed is I didn't put the stakes up front. So that's why I invented sort of this Vision voice where the first issue, it's like, at the end of this comic, the world blows up. So at least people knew like there were some stakes involved.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting, but it's interesting that you pitched it as Breaking Bad Vision when really the person who broke bad was his robot wife, Virginia.
Well, they all broke a little bit.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. Like, I don't know if everybody who got this, but like once he said he used brain patterns to make his wife, I was like, oh man, he used a Scarlet Witch. I mean, she gonna go crazy. And then the first issue was like, yo, she went crazy. like what? Like that? Why did he think that was okay? But
that's total Frankenstein. See, that's what Frankenstein is, right? Like, Igor goes to get the brain, he gets the wrong brain and brings back the killer instead. See, that's just me ripping off Mary Wollstonecraft.
I guess, there's a lot of Frankenstein in it. I thought some Pinocchio stuff, like all the... What was interesting was like, how come it felt like his family was malfunctioning way more than he was? Because we get to a point where they couldn't understand trauma, and then they start repeating their words. It's like, I thought like a computer. It's just like, yo, Windows froze on them joints like all the time. What was some of your thought process on dealing with that? Like the boy, he froze after like the big traumatic event in the beginning, and then like the wife couldn't handle like suburbia, and the daughter couldn't handle like, it was like my so-called life. She just couldn't deal with it. She just fell apart.
Well, to me, Vision was falling apart just as much as the rest of them, but he was more trained at hiding it. Like he had been around. The difference in them and Vision was they were new. They were just sort of meeting these challenges for the first time, whereas Vision was sort of experienced with hiding that pain and sort of repressing it. so their pain was closer to the surface. His was just sort of equal, but he was able to hide it. That's why in the end it just kind of bursts out of him, because the more you oppress it, the more it sort of eventually is going to kill you. That's my thinking.
Okay.
All right. Got
All right. So at this time, Vision's getting hot like fire. Everybody's jockeying it. You have a nice little battle between the publishers over you. Like
That's always the best.
Like a nice little like NBA summer season, you know. Who's gonna get Tom King? And then you get the exclusive at DC, and you get Batman. You get Batman after like super popular Scott Snyder's run, and now it's your role in Rebirth to like do a whole different type of run. So what goes into your thought process of tackling basically the marquee superhero in American comics?
Mostly screams of fear. I really should say I was calm and cool and prepared, and I was like totally confident, but I was like not any of those things. So when I first got Batman, I call it the trilogy of, but it's Omega Men, Sheriff, and Vision. I see them as sort of three works that sort of are the exact same story. It's all about someone who's trying to do something good, and then everything falls apart, but in sort of three different genres and three different ways. So I was landing those three as I sort of worked on Batman, and my focus was still on making those land, even though Batman would sell 50 times as much as those. That was still, the pressure was on. So I think I wasn't even focused in much on Batman to know what was coming at me when I was on. I was like, they're just like, here's another title for your Batman. I was like, okay, I'll think of something when I get there, you know. And then I got the first issue in my head, which was a tribute to an old Flash comic, which is Batman on a plane and just seeing a guy who couldn't fly trying to save a bunch of people while in the air. And once I had that, I sort of started going. But Batman's tough because I feel like I stumbled out of the gates. Like I didn't know what Batman was. I was trying to make it, I don't know, what's the right word? I was trying to make it like the Batman everybody wants it to be. Like I was like, oh, here's Batman on the roof with Gordon, and here's Batman doing some cool gadget stuff, and like just kind of reliving the highlight moments, but not writing about sort of what the core of the character was, or not relating to it, or not doing artsy fartsy shit. And it took me a while to get my feet on the ground with that book, I think.
When do you feel you got your feet? Because reading it, to me, I think you got your feet around your Iron Bane.
Yeah.
That was a different, the whole the suicide, and then like when Bane came back and he was like, it's on and popping. That's when I was like, okay, Tom is doing some stuff I haven't seen before after reading like years upon years upon years, hundreds upon hundreds, hundreds issues of Batman comics. Is that where you feel like you maybe really started hitting your stride, and people really started getting into the work?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, that's the arc where I was first really proud of it, when Volume 3 was like, I really think this is really good comics. I mean, I think there are moments, there are moments I love in I Am Gotham, and especially I Am Suicide has some really cool stuff, but I'm still I feel like I'm like a really good cover band there, like I'm like, oh man, he's really nailed almost how the Beatles did it, kind of. But with I Am Bane, I feel like I'm singing with my own voice kind of a little bit. And I think it was there, and it was sort of the end of there when we started getting to. I got comfortable. David Finch was a tough artist to get a handle on, because he's just not someone I'd worked on with before, and if I finally sort of understood what his strengths were, because you got to be a good writer, you have to understand your artist's strength. That's like the key to the whole thing. And I started to understand what his strengths were, and started meshing with him. And then my favorite artist I worked with, Mitch Gerrits, came on the book, and then from there, I felt like we were starting to cruise and sort of knew what we were doing.
So speaking of artists, since the nature of how Batman's published right now, which is like every 2 weeks.
Ooh, it's hard.
You do have a different set of artists, like every basic arc. How does that change how you approach writing the story while keeping within the themes and the tone of Batman, since you're the ongoing writer for as long as you think about it? Because you will go from Finch, but then you go to Miss Gerrits, and then you will go to I can't think of the Janin.
Mikhail, yeah.
Yeah, on the War Joker Riddles. That's my favorite joint though. That's the joint. And then you got the Joel Jones on the current art, which is like each one is different, but the tone doesn't change. But it's like it seems like you do right to their strengths. So I wonder what goes into your mind when you're crafting the story.
So I had this thing when I was a kid that I hated. It was like a pet peeve of mine when you're reading a story and the artist switches halfway through the story, like Infinity Gauntlet's like the most famous one I can think of, where George Perez does the first one. Then Ron Lim, who's a very good artist, comes in, but it's not George Perez. And I hated that as a kid, and so I started making a vow. I was like, I'm not going to do that on Batman ever. And that was a stupid thing to say, and it made my life really hard. So in Batman, I always try to. I make the arc match the artist instead of make the artist match the arc. So I'm not writing first and then looking to who can we get to draw this. It's more like who's going to draw this and how can I write for them. That's the way it is. And with Double Ship, it's really hard because most artists can draw nowadays 10 issues in a year. If you're a really good artist, you draw 10. I mean, if you're a really fast artist, you draw 10. If you're a really good artist, you're looking between 6 and 8, which is crazy, 6 and 8 in a year. And if you think about it, in Double Shift, that's just 3 months. So that's a quarter of your year. So you need, right now at this moment, I have scripts out to 7 or 8 artists. And so you have to start thinking ahead of like what works for this arc, what works for that arc. So when you do Batman the first year, you're super far ahead because you knew Double Shift was coming. So we had McKell and Finch working at the same time before issue 1 was pitched. So like I Am Suicide, I Am Gotham written at the exact same time. But now that we're in the second year, we don't have that lead time anymore. So you're going to see smaller arcs. And the problem with Batman is some of these smaller books, you can get away with sort of like, there's like, DC has a bunch of these artists who are, they're basically workman-like and they do house style and they're fine, great. But for Batman, I never want to give that to the fans. I mean, Batman gets the A-list talent, gets A-list artists, so you have to plan super far ahead and jump around. And it's a mental challenge. But as long as you keep true to like sort of where you're going with the character and what you're doing. Like I knew like with Batman I have tentpole points. I was like I knew at issue 24 what the engagement would be, and I knew at issue 50 is the next sort of huge moment. So I sort of write to those big moments, and 75 will be the next big one after that, and then 100. So you think of it that way.
Coming off of that, how does it feel to go from doing that where you have to juggle so much that between all the different artists and all their different stories to sitting down and working with artists you really like Mitch Gerrits, like he worked on Sheriff of Babylon with you, and now he's working on Mr. Miracle.
Yeah.
How does that change this planning process and the collaborative process of knowing that you're only going to work with one artist and you're going to do a whole story and it's going to be fire?
Well, with Mitch, it's going to be... I mean, Mitch and I... The best way to work with an artist is if you can see... The way I work is I see a comic book in my head, and then I just describe what the comic book I see is. So the better you are, the more you can sort of predict what your artist is going to do, so that way you can sort of give them... You can match your beats to their beats. And with Mitch, I know exactly what he's going to do, and he just... Whatever he does it better. So it's super easy with Mitch. But I mean, it's that way with other... I work with Lee Weeks now, and whenever I see... I just close my eyes and I just see year one, because he just draws just like Mazzucchelli at this point in his career, which is brilliant. So I mean, I can see exactly what he's going to draw before he draws, and it's that easy with other artists. But Mitch is the easiest, and Mitch is my favorite artist because he's the most humanist artist in comics. He makes the extreme crazy into something real and grounded, and that's what I like best about comics, is when you take something crazy and insane and then add humanity to it, and so the crazy and insane becomes a metaphor for sort of the problems we face as humans, and Mitch just matches that perfectly.
So, how does it feel right now with the current positive response to all your work right now in terms of working and making comics? Having these big stories with Batman, like the Button, having a celebrated run with the engagement issue, having everyone respond so well to Mr. Miracle, which that's a digging in the long box's character. Like, I love Mr. Miracle, but
dude,
everybody
you were
ain't on
essential
Mr.
to that.
Miracle.
You were essential to that book, Julian. You're playing it down.
Yes, I know. I play that one. I know.
I got Mr. Miracle. I didn't ask for Mr. Miracle. Mitch and I were going to do jokes and riddles, which in as a separate 12-issue sort of miniseries. It was in like The Wire with jokes. It was a totally different thing. And DC loved the idea. They're like, Joker versus Riddler, that's great. Put it in the main book and give it to Mikkel. and they're like this. They're like, this is the best news ever. And we're like, oh wow, you just canceled Mitch's eye book. And they're like, oh yeah. So then again, I don't mind being pitied. So out of pity, they're like, yeah, we'll give you another book. And I asked Dan. We went out drinking and he drank me under the table and I was so gone. And I said, well, just give me a character. I don't care who it is. I just want someone I can run with. So someone you won't get in my face and I can do crazy stuff with. And he said, Mr. Miracle. And I said, oh, great. New Gods, Jack Kirby. And then I had no idea what to do with it again. It was just like the Vision picture. Like, he's my favorite character ever. Oh, no. I was like, I haven't changed at all. And then I was talking to you, and I was like, I told you, I was like, they gave me Mr. Miracle, and I kind of had this idea. I was like, I knew it was going to be sad and depressing, lots of people looking out windows crying. And you were going off because you're a huge New Gods fan, like deep.
Yeah.
And I had read them somewhat back in the day, but I had read more Simonson than Kirby New Gods. And you're the one who said, well, what about Darkseid is? I was like, well, yeah, what does that mean? I was like, Darkseid's just like Thanos light kind of. What's that was? I know, right?
Disrespect. Yo, you gonna have a bad day tomorrow just because you disrespected about repeating that again.
I was like, yeah, he's Thanos, but he's like Thanos, but in a purple dress. And then you were like, no, you don't understand. It's Darkseid is, and I was like, that's a meaningless phrase. And you're like, no, Darkseid is like. Have you ever had that moment where you had to make you knew you had to make a good decision, but instead you made the wrong one? I was like, yeah, and you're like, Darkseid is. I was like, oh, and then you're like, do you know this whole? And then we just had this sort of terrible election. You're like, no, you know what that is? It's like that's Darkseid is. not to get political, but and so that's when that series gelled to me, was you saying that, and I got this because we've been doing this thing in Sheriff where we sort of, instead of showing the violence because I didn't want to show kids getting shot in the face, we went to black and just put the sound effects. And so I had this in my head. I just saw a black panel where it says the white writing Darkseid is, and while we were having that conversation, and that's when that whole gel was you, man.
Thanks. He also makes me sound way more reasonable. I was low key pontificating in the middle of New York Comic Con in front of like a whole group of people. It was great. It was like this, but I was wilding about the fourth world. But
I put another Julian in the latest one where I called the High Father Shepherd of the Gods. That was something we talked about.
I don't want to get real deep right there. That'll take over. That's me theorizing. But I want to get to some of these questions though.
All right, yeah.
First question is gonna come from Matt, who's over there in his Blue Beetle shirt.
What's up, Matt? I'm sorry about the swear words. Don't say them at school.
Baltimore Comic Con, remember?
Wow, then I'm sorry about those swear words too.
His question is, in your mind, what motivates Orion to act now? He acts. Did I read that?
Act the way he does.
Act the way he does. I have theories and questions about that too.
Wait, you're reading Mr. Miracle? Oh, don't read the next issue.
I ordered it.
Oh, yeah, I ordered it. Whoops. I think I read Watchmen when I was at your age, so it's cool. Tell your dad I'm fully employed.
Yo, that's a heavy book for elementary schooler.
To me, it seems perfect. I mean, this is a guy who is genetically Darkseid, right? Like he has that streak of evil inside him, and he's now been given the burden of leadership, and he sort of sees that he's the only thing standing between himself and what he perceives to be an apocalypse, and for that he sort of thinks of himself more godly, and it's power corrupts and ultimate power corrupts ultimately, and I think that's the idea behind the character is that and it comes from just looking at headlines or being in the CIA after 9/11. When you're fighting an enemy you really think is evil, you start to do evil stuff, and you start to corrupt your own self. And that might be necessary and that might be good, but it's something that happens. And I think that's what happens to him in this book. That makes sense.
It makes sense. I still don't think any of this is happening.
Dark side is.
No, anti-life is real, y'all. These are some questions online from the good Fantom friends
That's nice.
on the internets.
Thanks, everybody.
This is from Antonio Jordan.
Just like people
I'm probably
stand up
mispronouncing his name because of the accent. It asks, what's the work you're most proud of?
I should say all of it, but no, there's certain issues I like better than others. I really like Sheriff 5, where it's the two of them sitting around having a conversation. I really like Vision 10, where they have the robot's prayer, where he sits down with his daughter and they sort of pray for God to exist. I really like Mr. Miracle 1 and Mr. Miracle 5, which hasn't come out yet and you shouldn't read. I really like the Commandy issue that nobody read, where I did a black and white issue with Kevin Eastman, and it was really sad and depressing.
It's here at Fantom Comics.
Yeah, it's here at Fantom Comics. Please buy it. You'll be the first. Third.
People ain't up on Commandy yet. They ain't have to. That's your next 12-issue run, right?
I really like a short story I did with JP Leone called Black Death in America. I got nominated for. Yeah, I mean, and there's stuff I've done that I'm not proud of, but most of it's all right. There was a Teen Titans issue. Woo.
Josh Pollock, is the school Vin and Vision attend specifically based off on TJHSST? What was it? Didn't you tell
Thomas
us?
Jefferson High School for Science and Technology.
Yeah, I don't know Virginia schools. I don't know Maryland schools anymore. I'm old.
Yes, yeah, it is. But it's called Hamilton because I grew up in LA, and my local high school was Hamilton High, where my brother went to school. So it's based on sort of those. It's named after the school my brother went to, but it's based off of Thomas Jefferson. TJ.
Learning things. Steven
Which is a
Spotswood.
crazy school.
It's a crazy school.
They have like 7 hours of homework a night and all this.
Bruh. How is that?
Slow kids.
Yeah, for the slow kids.
How did I go get them a job? But Steven Spotswood, when it comes to DC and Marvel properties, what's on your wish list of things to write?
I get that question a lot, and the honest answer is, and it's not a good one, but I don't really care. I don't care who I mean, I care in terms of I like writing Batman because a ton of people buy it. It's nice. It's nice to pay for college for my kids. But I don't care in terms of the character. I think it's what you bring to the character that's more important. It's the freedom it's the editor you work with. It's the artist you work with. You put yourself in the character. I mean, if someone gave Alan Moore the Charlton characters and he turned them into Watchmen. So like I said, someone gave Frank Marion Daredevil. It's not about the character; it's about the energy you put into that character. So I care more about the freedom they give me. That said, I really want to write Fantastic Four, but they'll never let me.
I don't know, man. You got hot. If you wanted to do the Bendis switch, maybe they'd be like, you can have Fantastic Four.
Not while you're exclusive to DC.
Yeah, no. I got 3 years to go.
Woo! Checks. That's a lot of checks. Jesus. Or hopefully it might be Jesus Campos Hernandez. Dear Mr. King.
Jesus asks. Dark side is, but Jesus asks.
Dear Mr. King, there are a zillion books out there about becoming a comic book artist.
Yes.
But are there any books that you yourself have used or can suggest for someone that knows zero about writing in this medium? How did you become a writer for comics? I think we covered some of that in the beginning of the talk, but there's book stuff or what you should do. What's the advice?
Yeah, so when I decided to become a writer between CIA and the actual writing, this is a stupid deep cut, but you guys know Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey?
Yo, that's the movie.
Right? That's a good
movie.
So my favorite moment in that movie, I think about it all the time, is like for 2 movies, these guys have been talking about how they're going to be rock stars and they're going to metal and they're just going to rock out. And at the end of that movie, they get on stage and they just got there and they're like, we know everything that's good about metal. We've lived metal lives. We're going to nail this. And they start and they go on their instruments and they suck. And they're like, oh, we forgot to learn how to play. And then they go away and they become like, that is totally what it's like to be a writer. You're like, you know what's good, you know, you have that energy inside you, you've had the experiences inside you, and you go and you write and you suck. And you're good enough to know that you suck at it. So what I did was I went up to, this is for old school, but I went to the Borders that used to be here. What was it on, like 18th up there? It was a beautiful Borders, man.
Yo, that's why I bought that big Tash and DC book on the last day.
Yeah.
It was a good day.
And I went there, and they had a shelf on writing, and I literally bought every book on the shelf, or I'd sit in the book, but I would sit in the store, and I would read. And
That's why there is no Borders.
DC has a library system.
Yeah.
Yo, but Borders had coffee, fam.
And it was right next to my wife's. I was house daddy at the time, so I'd bring my kid there, and he'd take his nap in Borders, and I would sit there and read the books. And when he woke up, my wife would come and have a sandwich with us. And so I read like John Gardner's book on how to write. I read Stephen King's book on how to write. So I just read a ton of books on how to write. The best one I thought for writing comics is, again, not surprising, but Alan Moore wrote a book on how to write comics, and it's available on Amazon. It's like $5, and it's like all the secrets you'd want. And if anyone wants to write, I would start with that book. That's just a brilliant place that breaks down how to write comics from the guy who does it better than anyone, or used to.
Yeah.
He ain't crazy. He just sick of people asking questions about old comic books.
He's just really, really high.
He's like, why are you asking me the same questions for 10 years?
And you may be trying to lay a curse on Grant Morrison.
That's true.
Yeah, that's my favorite beef. But
It's just two old wizards.
yes,
Well, it's like Grant Morrison doesn't appear to have anything against Alan Moore, so it's like totally one-sided.
it's like a comic book battle.
Yeah.
In real life, and they're both British, so we don't totally understand it.
They worship different magic gods.
I know. It's so good. I've only met one of them. I need to meet Alan Moore, but
I don't want to meet him. I'm
I do.
terrified of him.
I bet you he's probably cool as hell. We talk about old music or something. Will Dawson asked about Darkseid is, and we kind of covered that when you explained.
We covered it.
When I went off a rant.
Yeah, I stole it from you. I get it.
No, ain't no stealing. Danny, I cannot.
But that's
say
a Grant
his
Morrison
name.
idea. See, it all goes
It
back.
is.
Let's
It
start
is.
with Grant. Yeah.
Yeah, he used that a lot every time he messed with the Fourth World. He used Darkseid as he.
That's Kirby going to Grant, going to you, going to me.
Yeah, it
That's
went through a couple.
It went through a couple, but I got you.
Yeah. I put more rap music into it than Grant Morrison did, though.
You know, Grant loved FUD. That was the one he loved when he talked to me.
He would love the FUD issue.
He loved the FUD issue.
Because he likes stuff like that. Because he's weird. He's dope, but he's weird. I can't be mad when he owned a castle. That's what you gotta get Batman sells up to buy you a castle. Arkham Asylum boy have a castle. You gotta get time to get a castle.
Dude,
yo.
a castle in Scotland is the same as an apartment in DuPont Circle.
Yo, you can't put no arches on an apartment in DuPont Circle.
Same
though.
price. I'll
Probably use gargoyles. Fine.
There are a few writers. This is Danny. I don't want to mess up the list. Michaelis.
What's up, Danny?
There are a few writers I associate with the visual mechanic like I do. In the 9-panel grid, you've been able to use a number of different ways to count literal time, to intersperse credits and quotes. With moments like a movie and a Mr. Miracle, it gives us flashes of something not quite right. So I'm guessing this is a question about your many uses of the 9-panel grid.
Yeah.
Ending with how you're playing with it in captions in Mr. Miracle.
When you put a comic on the grid, it gives you a lot more control over the reader's experience. At least it gives you control from the script moment to the time the person reads it. I don't know. Local comics is deep history. We can go into it, but there are different kinds of grids, and I've experimented with all of them. I like the 9-panel one first. I'll just go through them. An 8-panel grid, which Karl Barks used a lot. If you read old Karl Barks comics, they're all on an 8-panel grid, which is sort of 4x2. It's tough because you lose that sort of triple joke element that you get with 3-panel grid. Same, different, same, different. And just 1-2 is a little harder to do, but it's a better for 2-panel grid is good if you can tell a story without decompression. But after Bendis, we're all using decompression now, so doesn't work. 6-panel grid is what most old comics before 1960 are based on. Usually 6-panel grid you'll see, and if you look on year 1, these 6-panel grid. 6-panel grid it moves a little too fast for me, so that's 2 stacks of 3. And again, you're losing the 3 thing. If you use 3 panel grids, it's what Darwin Cook used, where you're just 1, 2, 3. That's lots of fun. You do the sort of the widescreen. But then comics, I hate words in comics. If you notice, I don't use a lot of words. So my comics read really fast. I feel really guilty about that. And so if I just use a 3 panel grid, the comic would read super fast because you'd just be 3 pictures with 2 words on them. And you read a comic, and a comic usually takes 8 minutes. That'd be 4 minutes. It'd be $4 for 4-minute comics. That's tough. So that leaves you with the 9 panel grid, which I think works the best. And again, it's me copying Alan Moore, copying Steve Ditko, copying Keith Giffen, and it's a way to control time. It's a way to control your experience, and just the whole point of being a comic book artist is to make you slow down while you read. And with a 9 panel grid, I can slow you down a little faster.
I can slow you down faster. There.
Make you look at every image more and more and more, so you get that bang for your buck.
Yeah, you get that bang for your buck.
Then okay, so we kind of answered how do each of your different uses come about. How far into your process do you think about how or if you're going to use it?
It depends. It depends. I hate it depends answers. At the beginning, at the script point, I'm like, if I'm going to use a 9 panel grid, I just use one. Usually, if I'm working with a new artist, like I said, like I did with Barnaby, I put them on a grid. It's a way to make bad artists look good, or not bad artists. Bad way to put it, but storytellers who don't quite yet know that's the best way to tell a story. Put them on a grid, and it sort of can emphasize the goodness in their art. The goodness in their art. Oy vey.
Whatever Sunday.
Emphasize the level of craft within their visual representation.
Julian Lytle is.
Yo, my art education cost me $125,000. I should be able to talk about
every
art.
penny, right? You should have just gone to Borders. You can sit for free. And just read it.
I should have.
But I decided right at the beginning if it's going to be 9. Now, if you look on Sheriff, Mitch would do things where I do a 6 panel grid, and I'd put 6 panels on a page, and he would just expand them to 9 because he started to fall in love with sort of the medium. And so a lot of Mitch takes stuff and puts it on 9 panel grids because he knows it. Then when we did everything in except for the first 3 pages of Mr. Miracle are all on the 9 panel grid, and that's such an obvious metaphor. It's not even worth saying, but it's obviously about a guy who's trapped inside an experience, and a 9 panel grid drops down a metal bars in front of the reader and puts you in these small little boxes so you feel the claustrophobia of his depression and his situation. Yeah, so that's for me. It's just like the most obvious metaphor.
Yeah. I got that as soon as if you get to that double page spread, it's like, yo, he caught. That's why I don't believe anything else in the comic.
Jacob's Ladder?
Yo, he's in it. He gonna get out though. Spoiler alert. His name is Mr. Miracle. It's kind of free.
That's not his name.
That's his name. His granny named him that. That's his name. His mama named him Clay. I'm gonna call him Clay.
That's so funny.
Mark Ingleson.
Yep.
Who are the writers who have most influenced you? So we got one off the Alan Moore.
Yeah.
Check.
Frank Miller, who I know now, which is crazy.
That is kind of crazy.
It is crazy. We're like friends. He makes fun of me.
You're in the Batman Hall. You're in the Hall of Batman writers.
I went to his house.
You went to the guy.
Yeah, I went to his. Yeah, he has a loft. He has a little.
Of course, he has a loft.
Yeah. And he has original Steve Ditko art on the wall. Oh, it's so awesome. But what he collects? His nerd is he collects toy cars. His house is full of toy cars. Sorry, that's awful. Anyways,
I hope they have money to collect things like that.
Frank Miller, Louise Simonson, who I've also met and hung out with. She was my favorite writer when I was a kid, and she's the nicest person in the world. And
fantastic X Factor comic show.
Oh, dude! I mean, that's where the marriage comes from. When I was a kid, when Cyclops proposed to Jean Grey, that was the biggest moment in my sort of kid comic book career. I was like, oh my god! I was just going like, did you hear Cyclops propose to Jean Grey?
Yo, that was major, though.
And they're like,
yo, that was major.
You're a nerd. We're gonna beat you up later. I remember how excited, so I wanted to recreate that. So that's that's the direct Louise Simonson ripoff. And Stan Lee and Jack Kirby obviously are huge influences.
All right, this is a question I kind of have too. It's a little bit different, but around the same way. Jerry Frankie. Okay. What brought you to decide Kite Man would be your throw line character for Batman? Also, yo, I'm not the biggest Kite Man nerd. Has he?
You're not the biggest Kite Man nerd?
No.
I didn't know there was a nerd you didn't endorse.
Yo, you can know about a lot of rando characters. You know this. You got mad Batman friends. They be knowing stuff. Yo, was he always Charlie Brown though?
No, he was not always Charlie Brown.
Yo, it's Charlie Brown.
Yeah, his name is, in continuity, his name is Chuck Brown.
I was like, oh no, it's the best. Sorry.
Batman created in 1960 by Bill Finger, which means Bill Finger created Batman, Robin, Kite Man. He's like, yeah, the trilogy.
Wayne Manor, the giant dinosaur, the big penny.
Why Kite Man? I mean, yeah, hell yeah, right? So I wanted to, Kite Man's, like I said, I'm a huge Frank Miller fan. If you read Frank Miller's Daredevil run, there's Stiltman is like sort of the through line for that whole thing.
Jake's favorite.
Yeah, right. Stiltman's and the best part about Stiltman is that when I was a kid, like it's funny because his only power is to get taller, but it's also kind of cool. You're like, oh yeah, if I had stilts, I could rob a 67-story thing. Like there was also something slightly cool about it, which I can't describe. So I wanted to do that. So I was basically copying, and then Bendis had copied that using Owlman, right, in Daredevil.
Yo, but Owlman was always low key hard though. Like that's
but
not
he wasn't
a big,
like a big
jump.
villain.
He wasn't a big villain, but like, yo, he's Owlman. He run them streets like he's already tough. But Kite Man though, Kite
Man's tough. No, he's not tough.
He's not tough. He just got punched in the face in Lego Batman movie. I saw him. It was crazy.
so well, I mean, I had this issue of Batman, and it was an issue where Gotham Girl's mourning her brother's death, and she's going a little crazy. And I wrote it, and it was all sad, and people looking at windows like I do. I was like, oh, it's Batman. I got to put punching in. So I put in 3 random characters, and one of them was Kite. And I literally Googled like worst Batman villains. Not because I wanted to put the worst ones in, but I knew the one. If you use a higher level villain, you have to ask permission. Like if I want to use the Joker, then I have to be like, okay, what is Scott doing with the Joker? Or what does Grant have planned with the Joker? If I use Kite Man, nobody's gonna need permission. So I was like, so I picked 3 low level villains, and I used Kite Man, and I did a 9-panel grid of Kite Man breaking into this building, and all he said was the word Kite Man, and he ran on. And I thought it was hilarious. He says his own name while he shouts the way he runs. And Ivan Reis was drawing me, and he got to panel 6, and I think he just got tired of me. He's like, fuck it. And he drew a big splash at the bottom, and so then we had this big splash with no words on it, and I was like, I had to have him say something else because he said Kite Man, and just looks, he had his arm, so I just added hell yeah because he's like, Kite Man, hell yeah. Like, he's really proud of it. And that made me laugh. And so then from then on, I just started using. And then I'm a huge Charlie Brown, Charles Schultz fan. And like I have them like pasted up on my walls and stuff. And I just think those, if you talk about words paired with pictures being like what comics are, the height of all comics was Charles Schultz, sort of 1959 to 1971 maybe. I just think that's just the transcendence, the best the art form's ever been. And so I was another way to pay tribute to that.
Yeah, I'm just surprised no one else caught, like, I didn't know his name was Chuck Brown. And
that was Tony Isabella did that.
He's
Black Lightning.
He's Kite Man, and Charlie Brown always had the damn kite in the tree. I was like, he always has a bad day. I was like, bruh. And like, so like, who was the other 2 words? Because it's like, I know Condiment King had to also come up when you search for the words.
But Condiment King I'm mad about Condiment King. Because people always give me, Tom, do the Condiment King, what's your Kite Man? No, Condiment King was made by Grant Morrison as a joke. That's him making fun of other stupid Batman villains.
He got a Lego now, though.
But that doesn't matter. But that's not Kite Man. That wasn't a joke. That was Bill Finger thinking he had nailed it that day. Like that was Bill Finger being like, done it again.
Wait. When did he make Kite Man?
1960.
You sure he wasn't also looking at
maybe I'm not.
He was like, yo, Joe's got something right here with this.
That's what I'm saying. Like making Condiment King is a joke that's supposed to be a joke. What's fun about comics is taking like something seriously that didn't work and making it work somewhere else. That's a different sort of thing. See what I'm saying?
No, I get you. I just know, like, I wasn't expecting Kite Man to be that fire. So I guess it is my last question.
Oh, my wife got so mad at me about Kite Man because my kid's name is Charlie. He'll be here soon, and named after Charlie Brown, right? And so then I was writing this scene, and I was like, I had to have his kid die, and I was like, oh, how did I make his kid? I'll make him Charlie Jr. I didn't even think about it, and so I'm writing this thing, and my wife reads the scene, like, you killed a little boy named Charlie in your book. and my daughter's name is Claire, and she's a Gotham girl I named after her. So my daughter was like, I have a superhero named after me. My son's like, I died in a comic. I got a rock. It's like so perfect.
So my last question is, before we start getting to people signing, is just how important is it that the editors that you work with, that you have a good relationship with in terms of creating?
That they're not
the
evil
comics?
people.
Yo, I'm not stepping into that recent stuff. I'm just let's stick with the yeah.
It's probably the most important thing about comics is that you have an editor you can work with, because an editor can mess you up. I've had comics go out where I get them in my door and I open them and I'm like, oh, those aren't the words I wrote. The editor changed it, because the editor has the final cut. They're the people. They can change your words for you. They can put in an artist you don't like. They can change a color you don't want. So you have to have a trusted relationship with that person, because they control. Like, if you're writing and you want to write good stuff, you want to control everything about that. But in comics, it's a creative medium. It's a medium you have to give up control with, and so you have to trust the people you give up control to. So yeah, it's utterly important, super important. And I work now with basically one editor, Jamie Rich, who wrote Lady Killers, if anyone read that, with Joel Jones. And I just think he's the best. He's probably tied for my favorite editor, Will Moss, who I worked on Vision with.
Is that how Joel Jones ended up drawing Batman?
Well, yeah, I mean, Jamie knew her, but it was we worked together to get her on that book. And
she also draws the best Talia I've seen. She actually looks like she's from the area of the world she's in. I thought that was amazing that it took this long. Woo!
Yeah, well, that wasn't
40 years, right?
That wasn't a tough call. That wasn't a lot of debate. Yeah, I mean, we just. I'm just looking for good artists, and Joel draws good art. So I love work Jamie Rich, and because he's a writer, he sort of knows the problems, and he gives me space to work.
All right, I think I'm done here. I'm going to let Tom interact with all you fine people in the store.
Thanks, man.
And thank you for appearing in the store and talking to you people. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Tell them they can ask me questions while they come up.
Yeah, you can ask some questions, and he'll draw like faces on the Elmer Fudd issue.
I will do that. They'll be terrible, but I will draw them.
Yeah. That's it. Just get ready. I guess we're gonna move out of the way so they can make the line.
Yep.
Get the line popping.
So yeah,